Hello and welcome to the Londoners World Cup preview livestream. The Qatar 2022 World Cup starts on Sunday with no alcohol but plenty of juicy matchups. We'll be running through every team and every group in the tournament with some real expertise throughout and some big predictions to come. I'm your host, George Sims, and we're going to start today with Group A, made up of controversial tournament host Qatar, alongside the Netherlands, Senegal, and Ecuador. Hello. I'm joined now by Oscar Ress and Cam Stevens. This is a group full of unknowns with World Cup debutants Qatar, AFCON champions Senegal, an Ecuador side who got past Chile and Colombia to qualify, and Louis van Gaal's Netherlands. What can we expect to happen in Group A, guys?
I think it's a really interesting one, actually. And as you say, as you sort of run through that group, there is a lot of unknowns, but a lot of excitement, I think. I think we both expect the Netherlands to be quite comfortable in getting through. And second and third is not as easy to predict as it might expect. Senegal will have to deal with the injury of Mane. Qatar, any success they have will be under the cloud of the human rights abuses and treatment of LGBTQ plus people in their own country. And Ecuador are a bit of an unknown. They did so well in qualification and have stuttered since.
Yeah, I think, as you said, that battle for second is going to be the main talking point of this group. You've got the 2019 Asian champions and the hosts in Qatar, Ecuador, who unexpectedly got through South American qualifying, and then Senegal, who have a lot of talent in their team, but obviously the injury of Sadio Mane is going to be a big factor in that part.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned Sadio Mane's injury there. He is Senegal's star man and has, after they tried to say he'll miss the first game, he'll miss the first few games, they have pulled him out of the squad and replaced him with Balde from Barcelona. How will that injury affect Senegal? How does it affect the group as a whole?
Yeah, as you said, he was obviously included in that initial squad and hoping to just miss the first couple of games and then play later in the tournament, but he's been ruled out as of yesterday. It's really interesting. I mean, Senegal have still got a side that's packed with talent, but they don't have their talisman anymore up front. So there's going to be a lot more weight on the likes of Ismail Assar to produce that attacking output. And it creates another twist in this group for that second place.
Yeah, I think we can both sort of agree that they will still have enough talent to push hard for qualification in this group. It probably impacts them more after this group if they were going to get through. African champions, obviously, were expected to go quite far. There was a lot of people tipping them to be a bit of a dark horse in this tournament. Without Mane, I think that probably limits them more in terms of quarters, semis. Rather than getting out this group, we still expect them to push really hard and be that second place behind the Dutch.
Yeah, they've still got a good spine in their team. They've got Edouard Mendy and Koulibaly at the back. So they've still got more talent, you'd say, than Ecuador and Qatar. And we'd still expect them to get through to the round of 16.
I'd say the closest competitors are Ecuador. I think obviously did really well in qualification, surprised a lot of people to qualify from a really tough area. And they have Moises Caicedo and a good young group of players. Goal's a bit of a struggle, though.
The last 6 games, so obviously they did really well in their qualification, but their last 6 games, they've scored 1 goal, which is a bit of a problem coming into the tournament. But they haven't conceded in those games either. So it's sort of a bit of a balance. Will they produce goals or will they keep not conceding? It's really interesting between Ecuador and Senegal for that second place.
Yeah, we briefly thought Qatar might push hard. They have an exciting style of football through their manager, Felix Sanchez, who is a former Barcelona coach. So they play in a tiki-taka style, which is very attacking, but it just might leave them a bit open against more powerhouses of football. The Dutch might go hard at them with their manager Louis van Gaal, and that might just leave them open. And I think we're at a stage with Qatar where it's more protecting, not being absolutely blown out the water by teams, rather than sort of pushing hard. They are exciting. Almoez Ali is their top goal scorer of all time with 42 goals. He could well have a part to play, and who knows, with the home support, that they might pull off a few surprises.
Yeah, that first game against Ecuador on Sunday is going to be a real indication of how they're going to go this tournament. You say
Absolutely.
that's their easiest game in the group on paper, so can they produce anything to challenge for that second place?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you talk a lot about the teams fighting for second, and you have the Dutch as clear favourites. I mean, how do you see them doing in the tournament as a whole? Do you think they've got a chance at the title?
I think, yeah, as we say, we're pretty confident, we're pretty comfortable with them getting through. The problem will be in the knockouts. They haven't won a knockout tournament fixture in 8 years. They didn't qualify for the last World Cup, didn't qualify for the 2016 Euros. Louis van Gaal into his third spell as manager of the Dutch team. He will be looking after a difficult year for himself with prostate cancer, and he will be looking to end his tenure on a real high. They've got experience. It's not a problem of quality or experience in this squad. It's more just, can they rid themselves of the baggage of struggling in knockout fixtures?
Undoubtedly, they've got the most talent of any side in this pool by a fair margin. I think the interesting point is keeping department. They've brought 3 keepers who between them have 9 international appearances, and Van Gaal still hasn't named their starting keeper ahead of the first game. So I think later on in the tournament that could be an issue if they're switching keepers, or it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think we also have Virgil van Dijk as the top player, the one with the most quality in this Dutch squad for obvious reasons, but he's received criticism along with the rest of the Liverpool squad for their performance this year, and it will be interesting to see if he can recapture that best form. International football was a bit slower. You have that time that you wouldn't have in the Premier League, and it might just be that if he recaptures the form that has catapulted him into sort of being in the conversation for the best Premier League defenders of all time, then we start to see a very solid side at the back, as well as going forward with Memphis Depay and some really exciting players. And who knows, they could replicate their 2010 performance and go all the way to the final.
Absolutely. I mean, so you've mentioned Qatar a fair bit, and they are an exciting side on the pitch, but most of the conversation pre-tournament has been dominated by the off-the-pitch stuff. Do you think the actual team that starts against Ecuador on Sunday will be affected by all the talk around Qatar's human rights record, LGBTQ plus rights record, and all that? Or are they just sort of, I guess, numb to it almost?
I can't see a possible way how they're not affected by that. I think the pressures of a World Cup, hosting a World Cup, being the host nation, are huge. Being automatically qualified doesn't actually stand you in good stead sometimes. You know, and I think for Qatar, on the pitch, it might be that they're just hoping to sort of be there and not embarrass themselves. But off the pitch, the whole world is watching them. And a decision like banning alcohol a couple of days before the start, or as you saw with the Danish film crew being asked to stop filming in the middle of Qatar, you can't escape it. It's incredible the amount that's going on off the pitch. I just don't see how that cannot affect the players.
No, there's too much noise for those players not to be affected. We'll see it in the first game whether it's true or not, but it's hard to imagine that it doesn't have an effect.
Absolutely. And so you've flip-flopped a bit throughout your sort of conversation as to how this group's going to end up. But give me a concrete prediction. Who do you think is going to win this group? Who do you think is going home early?
Netherlands top. Senegal still have enough for second. Ecuador just close in third, and I think Qatar, unfortunately, going home early, staying home early.
Thank you very much, guys. And so just before you go quickly, a prediction for the whole tournament. Who's going to win and why?
England are going to win the World Cup simply because it's coming home.
Understandable.
Argentina are going to win the World Cup because of the Messi narrative. That would be incredible. The best player in the world.
It really would. Thank you very much, guys. That's been great.
Thank you.
And up next, we have Group B. England, obviously, as mentioned, are in Group B, and it is coming home. And they will be joined by the USA, Wales, and Iran in what is the most difficult group on world ranking. I believe I'm about to be joined by Charlie and Alex. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining me. England are the obvious big name in this group, but USA, Wales, and Iran are all still ranked in the world's top 20 international sides. Can we expect England to just breeze through Group B, or are there three potential banana skins in front of them?
I think England are obviously the outright favourites, as you would expect. But I think in the US, Wales and Iran, it's going to be a lot closer than people expect it to be. You know, England have got previous experience in major tournaments of playing the US and Wales. Obviously, back in the 2010 World Cup, we had the US in the group stage with the famous Rob Green blunder that we don't like to talk about anymore. But obviously, also Euro 2016 against Wales, a very close game there. So I think there's something about kind of tournament football and slightly lesser sides. You know, they'll probably sit a bit deeper. And England, the impetus will be on England to break teams down. We know under Southgate that England tend to be a little bit more pragmatic in the football they play rather than playing on the front foot. So it's going to be interesting. It could be an interesting contrast between all those sides. But I do think it's going to be a lot closer than people think it is, rather than England just breezing straight through, because the US have got players that can hurt England, as have Wales. If you know the likes of Gareth Bale, if Ramsey can find his footballing ability again, then you know they got players that can do some damage. And Iran are a bit of an unknown quantity. Carlos Queiroz obviously back in charge again, and actually Iran last time out in the World Cup, they had a very tricky group with Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. They're only a point off actually going through, and the side is largely the same from what it was back in Russia. So yeah, you'd expect England to top it, but it's very open for that second place. And if England aren't on it from the off, then that group winner spot could easily be up for grabs as well.
Yeah, just following on from what Charlie said, I can't really remember a time where England have always comfortably qualified from a World Cup group. It's never that easy. You know, there'll always be a difficult game. It's the World Cup. You have to qualify for the World Cup. It's the World Cup final. So all teams are there on merit, having qualified. So having looked at the likes of Iran and the firepower that they may have going forward, obviously Wales, England know all about them from 2016. It's not as easy a group as it might look, especially of course going by the world rankings, as you say. It is the only group with all four teams in the top 20. So I think it's going to be tough for England, but of course you'd still have them as favourites.
Absolutely. I mean, talking about England, are the expectations for them lower due to their terrible Nations League performance, beaten home and away by Hungary? I mean, barely won a game.
I mean, I would have said a week ago, yes, but then of course the Premier League games stop, or the European, everything stops, and you look at the players are boarding, a plane to Qatar, and expectation rises as everything does. It's England at a major tournament. England expects, it's all of that, expectation goes through the roof, because we want, it's been such a long time since England won a major championship. I mean, we've got so close only last year, of course, in the Euros, and 4 years ago, actually, even though if you look at the squad is a lot different to the one that made the semi-finals 4 years ago. And obviously that was almost kind of a surprise to make the semi-finals. Well, now I'd say there's quite a bit more young talent there that Southgate has got at his disposal. And I'd say that the expectations, kind of the Nations League stuff, it kind of goes out the window, and we're all, looking forward to seeing what happens.
I think just on those expectations, yes, as you said, George, the Nations League campaign was terrible. But I mean, if you look at Southgate's record in major tournaments, it is very good. The semi-finals of the World Cup in 2018, within penalty kicks of winning the Euros. So, there's a good record in those major tournaments. You can't obviously have good tournaments every time you turn up for one. That run is eventually going to come to an end. But I think there'll be an expectation on him to try and play a bit more of an expansive style of football, given the quality of players that England have got available. You look at the quality of players, particularly in those attacking positions, and you wouldn't find many teams in this World Cup that have got as good a crop of attacking players as England do. But it's just whether we can find that balance to unlock the potential of all those players and get them playing well in an England shirt. You see the likes of Phil Foden, who is an outstanding talent, great in a Man City shirt, but in an England shirt, it's not really happened for him. And it's the same for a lot of those players that are so good for their clubs. It hasn't quite happened for them on the international stage. So I think that'll be one of the key issues that Southgate faces, unlocking their potentials in an England shirt.
Well, away from England, the USA have some incredible talent, but still haven't quite looked as good as you think they should. Some of their best players, especially Christian Pulisic, I mean, they've called him the LeBron James of soccer over in America. Is it a massive problem that him and other players, someone like Weston McKennie, hasn't played that regularly for their clubs over the past sort of 3 or 4 months?
I don't know. Look, it's never ideal. You want to have players in form, have match fitness under their belts, but ultimately it could perhaps also maybe work in their favour, the fact that these guys haven't played a lot of football, so they could be a lot fresher. As we know, the schedule and the build up to the World Cup has been intense, particularly for the likes of Pulisic, or maybe all over Europe as well. But Premier League schedule's been intense. You've also had Champions League Cup games, obviously the league games as well. So there's opportunity for a lot of minutes in the legs, which can take a bit out of you. So, I mean, it's not ideal because you'd want him to have more minutes, but then you could look at it on the other side that he's coming into this tournament fairly fresh. So he could see perhaps the best of Christian Pulisic. But no, I do agree that on an ideal situation, you would want players to have more minutes in the tank than the likes of Pulisic and the like of McKennie do, because, as you said, they're kind of two of their real key players.
I mean, yeah, I'd agree, but also Pulisic has looked a really good player in an American shirt when he's played, and obviously he's in a team that I think is on an upward trajectory under Greg Berhalter. I mean, that obviously didn't qualify 4 years ago, and since then the results have been steady. But I think there has been progress. You've seen they've won the CONCACAF Nations Cup and the Gold Cup last year. And obviously, there's been a number of young players that have emerged during the last 4 years, the likes of Dest, Serginho Dest, Gio Reyna, Timothy Weah. There's a new outlook to this USA team, to the one that was obviously in 2014. So I still think they're probably the toughest team that England will face in this group. The only thing I will say also to kind of say is the last 2 friendly results for the USA weren't great. A loss to Japan, a draw to Saudi Arabia. So I guess, it's not all looking completely rosy for them. But it's the World Cup. Who knows what could happen? And
also, I guess, just lastly on the US, this will be kind of the beginning of the build-up. So obviously, they're hosting the tournament next, along with Canada and Mexico. So you think this will be the building blocks to really getting a good team together for hosting the World Cup next time out and really giving it a good go there.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, England played Wales at the 2016 World Cup, and Gareth Bale was brilliant, scored a brilliant free kick. He's still going. He's just won the MLS Cup with LAFC. Not been playing a lot, but he is a big game, big tournament player. How important do you think he'll be to this Welsh side?
I think it's pretty much, if he doesn't perform well, I don't think this Wales side will do too well. He's got 40 goals on the international stage for Wales. He's a kind of a big moments player. Yes, he's coming towards the end now. He's 33. Injuries, have been picking up more regularly for him. But yeah, as you say, he just won the MLS Cup, got that equaliser right at the end of extra time to take it to the penalty shootout, which obviously LAFC eventually won. But he has got the quality to still shine on the big stage. He's going to have a big point to prove, because this is going to be his one and only World Cup age-wise, and the fact that, Wales, when will Wales next get to one? But I think the concern for the Welsh is that, that there is a lack of quality there, really. I mean, yes, Bale is a standout guy. Ramsey is a good footballer, but his form he's not been able to find his form for a while. You've got Ben Davies at Tottenham, but the rest of them are just kind of average championship players. Not all of them, but it's quite tricky. But I think a sense of togetherness that always comes, that Welsh spirit, can make up sometimes for that lack of ability. We saw them do so well in the Euros to actually get out of that group, which was a really difficult group. Obviously, I know they got beaten by Denmark ultimately in the last 16, but I I think that togetherness could perhaps actually make up for a lack of quality on the pitch that they do have.
Yeah, I'm kind of similarly downbeat on Wales' chances as well, actually. I just think there's a lack of quality, I'd say, in central midfield. Of course, you can go on about Bale and Ramsey perhaps in a more advanced role, but if there's no kind of quality at the base of that midfield, kind of getting them the ball so that they can obviously do their stuff, I'm not sure. Obviously, that's not going to be good for Wales. And if you look at the Nations League performance, they lost 4 of the last 5. I think if you looked at that playoff game against Ukraine, they were pretty fortunate to win that game. Wayne Hennessy had to put in probably one of the performances of his career for Wales to get through. And for me, it just looks like a side that has peaked in terms of age and in terms of personnel. And so, of course, fantastic for them. First World Cup since 1958. Rob Page has done a great job to get them there, but I just think I don't see them pulling up any trees.
Absolutely. And I expect you're probably going to say England will top this group, but what are your predictions for the rest of the group?
Yeah, obviously England top. I probably think the US will just about get it. I think that US against Wales game, the first game of the group for those two sides, is going to have a massive outcome on who goes through in that second spot. So a win in that game for either side, and you could almost be qualified pretty much. So I think that's going to be a massive game. But yeah, I think I'd have it as England, the US, I'll probably say Iran third and Wales bottom.
Yeah, I agree with Charlie. I just think Iran, obviously 4 years ago, did very well in a tough group, as Charlie said earlier, against Spain and Portugal. They've got quality up front, Sadar Azmoun and Mehdi Taremi. I do think they could get third place. So, same with Charlie there.
Absolutely. And just before you go, guys, who do you think is going to win the whole World Cup and why?
Brazil. I think Neymar's going to break Pele's goal scoring record as well. I just think for Brazil, it's their time now. No World Cup, 20 years now? 2002, I think, was the last one that they won. It's well overdue. I think they've got a really exciting crop of players, and this is going to be the year for them.
Yeah, same. I think if things go as they should, that Argentina-Brazil semi-final will probably, whoever wins that, I think, wins the whole thing. Okay, I should pick one team, so I'll go Brazil.
Well, thank you very much, guys. That's been great. Try telling an England fan that 20 years is too long to win a World Cup. Anyway, up next, we've got Group C. That is Lionel Messi's Argentina alongside Poland, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia. And I am now joined by Paddy Ardil and Max Carter-Kiel. Hi, guys. Argentina come into this tournament as one of the favourites. Lionel Messi, for most people, the greatest player of all time, has been in red-hot form for PSG of late. They face Poland, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia. So what's going to happen in Group C?
Well, it's an interesting group, we think. I think sort of kick it off, Argentina are probably, they are pretty much favourites to win the group. Should be a relative formality for them at the moment. They're in excellent form, just off a 35-game unbeaten run. Which is huge. The real sort of battle will come in between Mexico and Poland for second place, and we think Saudi Arabia will be sort of pretty comfortably bottom.
Yeah, it's a really interesting sort of opening encounter in the group stage between Mexico and Poland. They're two sides that everyone wants to sort of back Poland each year in these tournaments because they've got a good squad. They've got players which are household names amongst footballing fans. Robert Lewandowski is one of the greatest forwards to have ever done it. Alas, hasn't ever scored in a World Cup, and doesn't look as though him and Poland, they're not making it click, is probably what I'd say. They're not making it camel click, probably what I'd say. However, Mexico, on the other hand, seem to do very well at these World Cups. Ever since 1994, they haven't lost their opening group stage encounter, and the last 6 or 7 tournaments, they've made it out of the group, which is fairly impressive, especially considering the players that they've had on show during that period. And they also have, we can't forget, international cult favourite Guillermo Ochoa, shot stopping in goals. So it's going to be a really interesting fixture opening up on Tuesday between Poland and Mexico, and we think the winner of that will spell the second place, because as we think it's Argentina pretty much a shoo-in for winning the group.
Absolutely. I've mentioned Messi already. This is likely to be his final World Cup. You can't really see him still going at the top level in 4 years. Can he finally cement himself sort of undoubtedly as the greatest player to ever play football and win the coveted World Cup trophy?
Well, huge question, George. He has hinted quite heavily that this will be his last World Cup. And I personally, I think we've had a look at it. We feel like this is probably his best chance in a long while, aside from the final debacle. We won't talk about that. He is obviously a great, possibly the great, but Argentinian fans like to talk about Maradona quite a lot, like to sort of look at that as a comparison. Messi winning this World Cup will well and truly set him above the rest. He's then completed pretty much anything in football. And I think he's got a huge chance. Lionel Scaloni, the Argentina manager, has sort of organised his side very tactically to play to the strengths of Messi, similar to what they've done in his second season at PSG. He doesn't do a lot of the running defensively. Lautaro Martinez does a lot of that. The ball plays, he drops deep like he normally loves to do, and is allowed to play passes to his attacking talent. And Argentina have always had a plethora of attacking options historically. But this year, I think they look really strong defensively as well. Their backline is led by Christian Romero, who's in serious form for Spurs. And he'll probably, most likely be partnered by Otamendi, who's slightly on the older side, but forms quite a formidable partnership at the back. And I think for one of the first times, it's their attacking talent is matched by the defense. So it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, they've just got that spine now. They've got a really solid keeper in Emi Martinez. They've got a defence that looks tough to break down. Players like Paredes in the midfield, and then their forward line's always been strong. And Lionel Messi, I would say already is the greatest to ever do it, but he'd like that cherry on top. They've won 35 games going into Qatar. They've unbeaten in 35 games, I should add.
Yeah.
A little slip of the tongue there, pal.
Careful.
But yeah, really, really good chance of them doing it. And I think Messi will be itching at the opportunity to bring it home in the dying stages of what has been a formidable career thus far.
100%. And with the top spot in the group, Argentina, seemingly a relative formality, what makes the battle for second place so difficult to call? Why are Mexico and Poland in particular so well matched?
Because it's two teams who possess good footballing names. They have, Mexico have a great reputation at World Cups, but neither of them look particularly strong going into this World Cup. You know, Mexico were overshadowed by Canada in the CONCACAF qualifying, but they managed to end up level on points despite some pretty underwhelming performances. Poland, despite having the names, we're looking at the Lewandowskis, the Zielinskis, Matty Cash. Hey. But, you know, they only made it through on the playoff, and it was by the skin of their teeth over Sweden, who dominated possession, and Poland managed to get the goal to progress to the finals. So it should make a really either exciting or overwhelmingly drab encounter, but it nonetheless will be one that decides the second place in the group, because it's one of the more difficult groups to call. There's been much conversation around groups of death, and this is one which is like a group of death for the journalists. So we back Mexico just because Poland haven't won their opening game at a World Cup since 1974, and their opening game is against Mexico. But hey, stats are for Prats, George. So we don't believe anything we say. But yeah, we reckon Mexico will pit Poland in that opening.
I think there's a huge question about whether Poland can finally find Lewandowski and get him firing. If they do that, who knows, really? You know, I think we've talked about Ochoa being a fantastic keeper in tournaments. I mean, what a guy.
Player.
Really good. But if he then comes up against an informed Lewandowski, I don't see a lot of chance, really. I mean, it's that connection. It's Zielinski to Lewandowski, or, you know, it's how Poland can find their main man. And I think that will really show us, especially because this game is the first game of the tournament, it will show us how far Poland may go. If they struggle, like we said, it could be a drab encounter. It could be a battle of pretty sort of almost stalemates throughout most of the game, which is difficult. And I think it's pretty obvious that these two are the main culprits. Saudi Arabia have a pretty ordinary side. They'll bring a lot of fans. They'll bring a lot of noise, very close. But they're not too strong. They haven't got a lot of experience. They haven't got a lot of experience internationally. All of their players come from their own domestic league, so pretty difficult there, and they're pretty dry on the goals front. So it will be Mexico and Poland, and it's just whether the teams can get each other firing.
I think we can't forget as well about Mexico at the last World Cup, opening up with a win over Germany. So if they can do it against the Germans, who's to say they can't do it against a struggling Poland side? We have entirely neglected discussing Saudi Arabia, so we probably should lean into that a little bit. Again, it's difficult to discuss with a lack of knowledge of the Saudi Pro League. Slacking on my front there, my apologies. But yeah, Hervé Renardi did very well with Morocco. We got them to qualify in 2018. So fair play to him. And in qualifying, they topped a group containing Japan and Australia, which, Australia are by no means the team that they were 15 years ago or so. But they face very much an uphill battle going into this tournament, and especially when you've got the likes of Lionel Messi in your group going forward. I don't know what you make of it.
Yeah, I just think the Saudis will struggle up top most of all. They did relatively well defensively in the qualifying. They won 5 of their 7 group games just by 1-0, which kind of shows that they're strong at the back. Hervé Renard, like you said, is an experienced manager. He knows what he's doing. But he's still, coming into the tournament, has a selection headache up top. I think that's quite difficult when you come into a tournament not knowing who your chosen number 9 is. He's kind of flip-flopping between Faris Al-Baraikan and Saleh Al-Sheri. Excuse my pronunciation there. But,
Excuse.
Got to do the best I can. And neither of whom are that effective, especially on the international stage. So we've sort of picked the Falcons coming at the bottom of the group. They may surprise someone. Who knows? If Mexico and Poland end up cancelling each other out and then get, Saudi Arabia nick a point here or there, it could really spice up the group a little bit. So we don't want to write them off as you never should in a World Cup. But for the time being, it's looking like they'll come.
I think it seems a safe journalistic bet to pick the Saudis to finish bottom of the pile in this particular group. Quite interesting that 12 of their 26-man squad play for Al Hilal, the AFC Champions League holders.
Yeah.
So it's not for want of lack of squad cohesion. It's just the quality and whether that will hold up, George.
Absolutely. So you've got Argentina very definitely at the top, Saudi Arabia very definitely at the bottom. Who are you going for between Mexico and Poland to get to the last 16? Obviously, Mexico have a sort of famous history with the last 16 that they always get there and never get any further. Do you think they'll make it this time?
Well, we just exhaled pretty heftily there because we've ummed and ahed.
Oh boy, have we!
Over the last couple of days over this very matter. Going into the round of 16, it will be either France or Denmark. We reckon that they'll be facing up against. So whoever goes through will have a difficult round of 16 game if they finish second. That is. That's not saying Argentina might throw it.
Shots all over the place.
Exactly. This is the World Cup. This is famously really exciting football is played on the international stage. We've been picking Mexico.
We have.
Purely because we wanted to go for something with conviction and then stand by it. But it could go either way.
I think we'll side on the Mexican side. As you've mentioned the history, we've talked a lot about their quality and how Poland aren't really clicking, or glicking, some might say,
or Matej clicking.
Well, that also. So yeah, I think we'll go for Argentina, Mexico, Poland, Saudi Arabia.
But then it will be a tough ask to get past that round of 16, as you said.
Absolutely. And just before you go, guys, who is going to win the whole tournament and why?
Arsenal are top at Christmas, so I'd go for them.
Well, excuse my colleague's honking chat there. I think I'm going to go for Argentina. Leo Messi's finally going to bring the coveted Jules Rimet home. And I boy, do I hope he does, because what a guy.
All jokes aside, yeah, I'm rooting for him all the way, and I'm pretty thoroughbred English, so Argentina to go the distance. That's a weird comment.
Yeah.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much, guys. That's been great. Thank you. So up next, we have Group D. Group D has reigning champions France in it, alongside Denmark, Tunisia, and Australia. And I am going to be joined by Matt Cox and Ben Fleming. So, as I just said, France come into this tournament as reigning champions, but there's been a lot of drama around the team, from Paul Pogba's knee to Paul Pogba's witch doctor. Denmark are gaining a reputation as one of the most efficient, organised international sides in the world, and Tunisia and Australia are also there. Are France your favourites to top this group, or is there an upset on the cards?
Well, the more I think about it, the more I think that there's very much an upset on the cards. So much so that I wouldn't even be too keen to call it an upset. As you said, France have got a lot of injuries. They're experiencing a few problems. So I think Denmark are ready to seize top place. But that being said, it would be a challenge, and I would not be at all surprised were France to take top. I don't know about you, Ben.
Yeah, I think at the start of looking at this group, I think we both sort of thought that France would have too much quality and probably too strong a squad to see off the challenges that Group D would present. But as Matt said, the more we've looked into it, looked at how this France squad has fared against Denmark and also fared sort of in their recent games, I think as Matt said, it's quite probable that we could be looking at France there second in this group. But I guess we can get into that more later.
Yeah, and if you look at the history, like the last competitive game for both France and Denmark beat France in the Nations League. They beat them at home in the reverse fixture in that Nations League campaign as well, and drew 4 years ago in the 2018 World Cup against each other. So really opposite trajectories, I think, since France won the tournament.
Absolutely. You've mentioned a lot there about France's injury problems. Talk to me about them slightly more. Who are they missing? How important are they going to be? And who's going to be there to replace them?
Yeah, well, I mean, the key two missing are in midfield: Paul Pogba and N'Golo Kante, the starting two midfielders in the World Cup final 4 years ago, and they played a really key role in terms of allowing the rest of that French team to thrive. We'll hopefully come on and talk about the plethora of attacking talent they got, but in Pogba and Kante, you had a really solid midfield that was able to provide creativity, but also clearly just to sort of break up play and allow France's best players to do what they do best. But both of those are missing through injury. They're likely to see Tchouameni and Rabiot, perhaps Guendouzi, come in that midfield, and those three are all very good midfielders, all playing at top clubs across Europe. But there's something to be said for the experience and just the amount of games that Pogba and Kante have played as a two in this French team. And that is certainly something that they're going to miss in midfield. And in defence, there's no injuries in terms of people being ruled out as such, but you've got Raphael Varane, Hernandez and Jules Koundé all coming back from injuries, which has seen them not really feature too much for their club sides. So I think there's probably concerns for Didier Deschamps as to who starts that first game, and whether his France team are going to be ready and fully firing in this early part of the World Cup campaign. That's perhaps where Denmark's best chance can lie is the fact that this France team will probably start to click into gear as this tournament goes on, and as their team hopefully shakes off a few injuries and the midfield pairing can play a few more games together. But in the group stages, you might well see a lot of chopping and changing at centre back and in central midfield, and that could be a problem for them against Denmark.
Well, so you've mentioned why Denmark could sort of hop over France because of France's problems, but what are Denmark's great strengths? Obviously, they got to the Euro semi-final against England at Euro 2020 just last year. Are they a similar side to that? Are they better? What do they do well?
Well, they will be similar. they'll arguably, I think, be stronger. Obviously, that team that had that run at the Euros was very much built on a strong defence, and that largely will remain the same. Kasper Schmeichel will play in goal, and Simon Kjær will be at the heart of the defence. Andreas Christensen will be there, and a good bonus for them is Joachim Andersen will be able to come in. He was injured for the Euros, and then Joachim Mähler will still be left wing back. And it's a similar conundrum for them at right wing back that they had in the last tournament, with it being slightly unclear who will start there, whether it's going to be Daniel Vass or Strigger Larsen. But in front of them in the midfield, Christian Eriksen's obviously going to be back, missed loads of the Euros after that cardiac arrest. So he's going to be their key player in terms of building play. But the defence is definitely where there's the most strength and depth.
I mean, potentially of the groups we've talked about so far, this is the one that has the clearest top two and bottom two. In Tunisia and Australia, there are two relative unknowns. Tunisia are in England's group at the 2018 World Cup. But do you think there's a chance that Tunisia and Australia can sort of break through into the last 16? And if so, how are they going to do it?
I would say there's probably a really slim chance of them breaking through. What I would say is they still play a role in how the group turns out, because as we said, France's midfield injuries are a real problem, obviously. And in Tunisia, Australia, and also Denmark, those are three teams that like to set up a deep, low block and will force France to try and create chances, which perhaps with a slight lacking quality midfield, they won't be able to do as well as if they had Paul Pogba in particular there. So I think Tunisia and Australia, I'd be very surprised if either of them came in the top two. But I wouldn't be surprised if either of them got a draw against France or Denmark to decide which of those two teams gets top spot.
Yeah, I think this is really a case of the haves and the have-nots in this group. As you say, I think I'd be really stunned if either France or Denmark don't make it through in first and second place. And I mean, the Australian side, for example, I mean, they've been blighted with injuries. You've got Harry Souttar, who's one of their first choice centre backs, has barely played a minute since he had a big injury last season, and you know they've got Gareth Kjol, who's an up and comer and has just moved to Newcastle United, but has only made one substitute appearance for Australia, and you're really looking at a pair of midfielders in Aaron Moore and Jackson Irvine as maybe any signs of experience on the world stage, and both of them, it's probably fair to say, have already had their better years. So I don't think, especially with the Australian side, there's either players that are past their peak and then some players that are perhaps that have seen this World Cup come too soon for them in terms of fully reaching the best of their game. So I think it's going to be very difficult for Australia in particular and Tunisia. I think they've probably got a few more players to watch out for, but they, I think, will also struggle against France and Denmark.
So you've said that Denmark could win the group. Do you think they will? What are your predictions for the group as a whole?
I think we're ready to bet on Denmark to finish top.
Yeah, I think purely because of the nature of this France side and the injuries and the fitness concerns, I do think this is a France side that will get better as the tournament gets on. And there's also the fact that they're changing formation, and Didier Deschamps has come out in the press conferences last few days and said they're going to move from a back five to a back four. So that's another thing that will, I think, affect their ability to make a fast start in the group. And I just could see them as Matt said, one of the small teams, maybe even Denmark, getting a point or beating them, and that's a way that they end up finishing second. So yeah, I think we're ready to back Denmark to go through as the winners, with Denmark in second place. France in second place, and then Tunisia in third, and a pretty lackluster Australia bringing up the rear.
Absolutely. I mean, that's been great. Thank you very much, guys. A final thing: who is going to win this World Cup and why?
I mean, from my point of view, it's unfortunate the way this group has panned out, because I think as Paddy and Max said, you've got the runner-up of this group is probably going to face Argentina. I'm not sure that either side will get through Argentina, and of course the winner of this group will come up against probably England in the quarterfinals. So that will be the end of their tournament. So I think I'm going to be back in England. I'm already bought my ticket. I'm on the train, and I think we're gonna bring it home.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Come on, England.
Well, you say that. I've just moved over on my laptop to see Wayne Rooney predicting Argentina to win. So at least you're saying true. Anyway, thank you very much, guys. That's been absolutely great. That's us halfway through. Up next is Group E. Two titans here in Spain and Germany, alongside Japan and Costa Rica. And I am now going to be joined by Abby Ingham and Ollie Gent. Hi, guys. This is perhaps the closest to a traditional group of death in this tournament, with Spain and Germany alongside Japan and Costa Rica. Are the two European giants just going to breeze through this tournament, or will Japan and Costa Rica present a real challenge?
I want to pick up on the word tournament in there, Jordan. I don't think they're going to breeze through the tournament. I think they're going to breeze through the group. I personally don't think that Japan and Costa Rica offer too much of a threat, especially personnel-wise and tactically. And I think that ultimately, when it comes to quality of player, I think that Germany and Spain will ultimately have too much for them.
Absolutely. So talking slightly more about Germany, let's look at first. I mean, it's the first tournament for Hansi Flick as coach. We've had Joachim Löw in charge since 2006. So that's a big change. And there are also some big debates across the pitch. Starting in midfield, they've got three great talents in Joshua Kimmich, Leon Goretzka, and Ilkay Gundogan. Who do you think Hansi Flick's going to pick in that midfield, and why?
Personally, for me, I think it will be. I would personally go for Joshua Kimmich at right back, which I think is a highly divisive opinion. And then that would mean that I could play Ilkay Gundogan and Leon Goretzka together as the midfield two, with Gundogan the more deeper line midfielder and Goretzka with a little bit more license to maraud forwards. But for me, I think Hansi Flick will go for I think against the weaker teams, I think he'll go for Joshua Kimmich and Ilkay Gundogan, and that's a little bit more attacking, a little bit more offensive. But then he'll go for the defensive solidity and the athleticism of Leon Goretzka, probably against Spain. That's depending on whether Goretzka is fit. He's obviously had his injury problems in the past, and whether that will plague him again remains to be seen in this tournament. But obviously, as we say, midfield is a massive pool of quality for Germany, especially with those three players. And they're obviously lacking in that right back area as well, which is why I would personally put Joshua Kimmich there, where he flourished so brilliantly for Pep Guardiola's Bayern Munich a few years ago.
Well, as I understand it, there are the lowest expectations for this Germany side that have been for a long time. Obviously, they won in 2014 and then got smacked out of the group stages really in 2018. What can we expect from this Germany side throughout the whole tournament?
I think it's going to be a mix of youthful exuberance, which they have plenty in the attacking third, and it's also going to be their experience and their tactical familiarity is going to be massive, especially when you come to think about Hansi Flick and his former Bayern allegiance with so many Bayern Munich players in the squad. I mean, we talk about Joshua Kimmich and we talk about Leon Goretzka. We haven't even touched upon the attacking midfield trident yet of Leroy Sané, Jamal Musiala, Thomas Müller, Serge Gnabry as well. So I think it's going to be. I think that familiarity is definitely going to help them, especially in the bigger game against Spain in this group.
And as you say, Spain, the other big team, they made it to the semi-finals of the last Euros, and a lot of people said they potentially should have won. They've got to the semi-finals of last two Nations League tournaments as well, but no one seems to really fancy them. Talk to me a bit about this Spain side. How good are they? Will they top this group? And how far can they go in the tournament?
Yes, so lots of people have already written them off, to be honest, because arguably this tournament has come a bit too soon for a team that are in transition. So they've got some really exciting young players, Xavi and Pedri. They would actually be 22 and 23 in the 2026 World Cup. So arguably, they've had to balance experience and young talent. And it seems like Enrique has chosen to go with young talent. But actually, they've added another teenager into the mix today because Luis Enrique was forced to make a late change because Jose Luis Gaia, the Valencia right back, suffered an injury in training. It was only actually an ankle strain, which would have only kept him out for a week. But Enrique savagely cut him from the squad and actually replaced him with Balde. He's only 19, plays for Barcelona, but he hasn't actually made his international debut yet. But he'll be joining the team, which you'd say that his Barcelona teammate Alba, he'll probably take the starting left back place. But that brings us into the positional questions. The biggest question mark I would say is in the midfield. Busquets is the only member of the 2010 World Cup champion squad. He arguably is at the end of his career. It will be his last World Cup, I think, and arguably doesn't have that many more 90 minutes left in him. And when you have someone like Rodri, who is the anchor to a very successful Manchester City team, there's question marks on whether he should start. And arguably Rodri would provide more protection in front of Laporte, who will be there in centre back, but question marks over who will be his partner. Likely to be Pau Torres, but that's two left footers in centre back. But it could be Eric Garcia. Eric Garcia played there in the friendly on Thursday. He actually played Laporte in left back on Thursday. So I think maybe there's questions there in the Spain defence. But I think I think we might be surprised with the Spain lineup. I think it will change for every game. There's a lot of spaces up front as well, because I think Morata will definitely start. But there's questions over Ferran Torres. Williams has been playing great. Olmo as well. So I feel like it will be down to what Luis Enrique picks on the day.
Yeah, 100%. Looking at Japan then, this Samurai Blue side have some top players, top Premier League experience as well. Arsenal Takahiro Tomiyasu, Takumi Minamino, now at Monaco, but was at Liverpool and also Southampton for a while. Daichi Kamada has had a great season at Frankfurt. He's been at top level for some time, really. Can Japan make it out of this group? And how will they do it if they do?
Well, although we may have written them off already, I think you may be cutting them off too early because they could surprise Germany and Spain, because arguably they can play to their weaknesses. Because they're a counter-attacking side. We've named some attacking players there, with also Brighton's Mitoma. He plays on the wing. But yeah, Minamino, all of these players, they turn the ball over high up the pitch and they want to create quick hitting chances. And Spain and Germany struggle to defend in transition. And that's actually what Japan is really good at. So arguably they could make it out on the group. If, Germany and Spain don't turn up on the day, I think over Costa Rica, it will be Japan.
I'd definitely add to that as well. I think that it's a similar case for Japan as well. Obviously, George, we alluded to it yesterday that Japan have got some really experienced names in their squad. Obviously, they've got Yuki Nagatomo as well, who a lot of Inter Milan fans will remember. At left back, we touched on Daichi Kamada as well, in attacking midfield, who's had a fantastic season in the Bundesliga for Frankfurt. And obviously, you've got Asano up front as well, who's your Bochum hero. But yeah, I think we can't necessarily write off Japan completely. But when it comes to the quality of their squad in comparison with that of Spain and Germany, I think it's very much a one-way street. And I think both the top sides will qualify with relative ease. Absolutely.
Just quickly before we have to finish, Costa Rica have brought in Luis Fernando Suarez as coach. He took Ecuador to the last 16 in 2006 when they were knocked out by England, and he also led Honduras at the 2010 World Cup. this Costa Rica side isn't as good as that side that had an almost legendary quarterfinal run in 2014, knocking out England and Italy. But is there any hope for this side taking points off the likes of Spain and Germany?
Honestly, short answer, no. And the reason why I think that is because they play very negative defensive football, and even when they're trying to put defense first, especially against the top tier sides like Spain and Germany, I think they'll give them far too much space, especially in front of, meaning that Spain and Germany can play in front of them and try and really pick those pockets of space up, which obviously the Spaniards and the Germans love to do so well. But don't obviously write off Costa Rica completely. I think obviously the two go-to players that many will know are obviously former Fulham technician Brian Ruiz and obviously former Arsenal winger Joel Campbell, who was obviously known primarily for his time at Olympiacos. Anthony Contreras as well is quite a decent striker. He notched quite a few goals in a relatively successful qualifying campaign for the Central Americans. They came fifth in their CONCACAF qualifying campaign. They beat the United States. They beat Canada in that campaign, but they also dropped points, especially away from home as well. So I wouldn't really count them as much of a threat to the top teams and even to Japan, I would say, either.
So if you've got Costa Rica at the bottom, Spain and Germany, to me, seem hard to separate. What are your predictions for how this group's going to play out?
I think we placed Germany at the top. They just have a much stronger team. Obviously, we've highlighted there's some issues with the Spain team so far. So it'd be Spain runners up and then Japan third, we think.
I definitely concur with that.
And just before I let you go, guys, who is going to win the 2022 World Cup and why?
So I've got a really stinky pick, and I will say France because I think they can do it on the big stage. I know there's obviously a lot of implosion and a lot of internal chaos at the moment within the French squad, and they've got injuries. But I think their strength and depth, the quality and the winning nous that they bring. Didier Deschamps isn't the greatest tactical manager. He's not the greatest. Man manager either. But I think that he's been there, done it at the 2018 World Cup, and I think that France will bring that.
Well, if that's an unpopular opinion, I'm sure that this will get a groan. But I'm going to go with Belgium. I think they're underrated, and I think that will go in their favour. They've got the best goalkeeper in the tournament, and they've got the best player in Kevin De Bruyne. So I'm going with them.
Well, those are some very interesting picks. Thank you very much for your time, guys. It's been great. Okay, so after those interesting selections, we are now on to Group F with the Belgian side that Abby has just said could win the whole tournament alongside Morocco, Canada, and Croatia. I'm now going to be joined by James Moultrie and Aisling Hannon. Belgium are the big name here. This golden generation, so much has been said of, and this seems like the last chance for them to get through. But it's not going to be an easy group. They've got 2018 finalists Croatia, Canada side that really breezed through CONCACAF World Cup qualifying, and a Morocco side that have some really special players. How do you think this whole group's going to play out, guys?
I think the kind of unknown around the group is perhaps the best thing about it. I think there is, as you say, George, some very obvious favourites in Belgium, but I don't think it's that simple. Obviously, they came third at the last World Cup, and Croatia did make it to the final, but they've both got aging kind of core players. So I think it's a question of whether those players are still able to produce at the top level. Obviously, they have got Belgium have the likes of De Bruyne, who's one of the best players in the world and the finest goalie, as Abby said just then. But it's kind of a question of whether the players around them are still able to do it. I know Belgium have very old defenders, and it's kind of a bit of a massive unknown, really, of whether they can still do it. And I think, as you say, Canada have a very small selection of quite exciting players who are very talented, and it's kind of, can they get Canada through the group, and then could they progress even further? It's kind of, I'm unsure. And I think Aisling is one of the people who's very much a fan of the Moroccan side and their chances to upset in this group.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Morocco are the underdogs of this group. I think they're going to perform really well. They played a friendly against Georgia yesterday, won 3-0, and Ziyech scored from inside his own half. Really brilliant goal. And I just think they're sort of underrated side. I know they've had quite poor performances, especially in the last World Cup. They finished bottom of their group in 2018, but they did have quite a tricky group in Spain, Portugal, and Iran. But at the same time, they drew with Spain, they lost to Portugal 1-0, they lost to Iran 1-0. So it's not as if they were played completely off the field. They just had really nervy performances. And I think going into that group, maybe their mentality was just tainted a bit by such big names in their group in Spain and Portugal. So it's almost as if they felt defeated going into it already. So I think now they're going to come back stronger. So obviously in their qualifying stage, they topped the group. They scored 20, conceded 2, which was huge. I know they had quite lowly ranked teams in their group. So they had Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Sudan, and then Congo in the playoffs. So, but they completely dominated it. They won all 6 of their games. And I think going into this, it'll be exciting to see how they perform.
Absolutely. So since 2014, we have heard a lot about Belgium's golden generation. I've already mentioned it. Despite spending a lot of time as the number one ranked international side in the world, they've not won anything. They've not even made an international final. Is this their last chance, or have they already missed the boat?
George, I think they've missed it. I think they had their chance in 2018 and narrowly lost out to eventual winners France in the semi-final. And then I think they would have been very disappointed with going out to, again, eventual winners Italy at the last European tournament. And I just think they really had a chance with kind of Company, Alderweireld, Vertonghen, all these kind of very, very talented centre-backs at one time. Courtois in goal, De Bruyne in midfield, Lukaku up front. All these players were peaking around similar times. Now I think it's getting to the point where I don't think they can win it. I think De Bruyne is still amazing, and it's undeniable. He's obviously leading the Premier League in assists, and he has led the league in assists many times in his career, and is still able to win any game pretty much by himself, be that through incredible vision, goals from outside the box, set pieces. He obviously scored a crazy free kick this season against Leicester, I believe, and he is amazing, but will they be good enough? I think Lukaku is going to miss the group stage and won't be back until at least the knockouts, which means they'll either have to go with Michy Batshuayi up front, who, granted, has done it in the big games. He obviously did win Chelsea the Premier League against West Brom, which was a pretty scrappy goal. And he's on decent form for Fenerbahce, who are top of the Turkish Super League and top the Europa League group. But that stat is slightly skewed by Enner Valencia playing completely out of his skin, which is very odd. But so I think Batshuayi could be an option. I also think they could go with the younger options of kind of Louis Openda, who's played very well for Lens in the French Ligue 1 and recently scored a hat-trick against Toulouse. But I think kind of with De Bruyne, you've kind of got any good chance because he will undeniably create chances, but not having Erling Haaland on the end of them is going to be slightly different for him. I think they have still got a lot of good players who on their day are unbelievable. Obviously, the main one are kind of slightly straying away from it is Eden Hazard, who is one of my favourite players of all time and is one of the finest players of the last decade. I think he's incredible to watch, but his 4 years stint at Real Madrid hasn't quite been the dream move he perhaps expected. He's been kind of plagued with injuries and poor form. And I think it's kind of a chance for him to perhaps have a resurgence, but the question is will Belgium actually be able to do that, and will they have a good mix of these kind of experienced players in De Bruyne and their two defenders? I think at the Roberto Martinez will obviously stick with his classic 3-4-3 formation, and it's kind of who will be the third central defender to play alongside Vertonghen and Alderweireld. I think Zeno de Basque played quite a lot, the 19-year-old for Anderlecht in the Nations League, but I think Wout Faes has also played himself into very good form, perhaps saving Leicester and Brendan Rodgers' job with Leicester having won 4 of their last 5 games and that only loss coming against Man City. I think he's been pretty much essential to that kind of revival of Leicester. So I think he would be unlucky to not find a start. And I think with the wing-backs, Belgium have a lot of options depending on who they play against. I think Thomas Meunier and Torgan Hazard, both obviously Dortmund players, could flank either side of the kind of Belgian 3 or 5, however you want to look at it. But I think they could go more attacking with Yannick Carrasco and maybe Timothy Castagne if they want to change it up a little bit. So I think Martinez will be happy with options there. And I think Belgium just kind of need to get over the line in a big semi or quarterfinal, like you said, George. They haven't made it to this final that they've been searching for, and almost kind of had the team to get there, but never quite made it. I think Yuri Tielemans, being older, being now into his mid-20s, could be a big thing for them. We know he doesn't score a bad goal, and yeah, he loves a big goal, as he scored against Chelsea in the FA Cup final a few years ago. So I think the chance is gone, but there is still enough talent in that team to get them there.
Absolutely. You talking about Eden Hazard there, it being 4 years since he's left Chelsea blows my mind. As you say, one of the best players of the last decade, and another of those players is Luka Modric. He's now 37, won the Golden Ball at 2018 World Cup and then the Ballon d'Or that year. But can he carry Croatia to another final?
I think so, George. I think we were speaking a lot yesterday, and I constantly described him as fine wine because even into his old age, he's still one of the finest players to watch with the football at his feet. I think he's just an incredible player, capable of winning you any game from any situation, no matter how in the mud his team are. Perhaps best shown in that semi-final against Chelsea last year when they really needed something desperate, and he produced probably the pass of the decade with an outrageous Trivela cross to the back post for Rodrigo to score. And I think Modric was so integral. Obviously, he won the Golden Ball and then the Ballon d'Or after the last tournament, even though he didn't quite manage to win Croatia the World Cup. He was undeniably the finest player of that tournament. I think Croatia were on the back foot a lot. I think perhaps looking at their route to the final of the 2018 World Cup, you can see their knockout stages. They were behind in all 3 of their knockout games, and in the first 2,
Having just slight technical difficulties, James Nashling will be back shortly. Really interesting Group F. I mean, Belgium are such a talented side, but really just get stuck behind. Anyway, we're now going to move on to Group G. I don't know if we'll hear from James Nash again later, but I am now joined by Alp Salfa and Elise Hammersley to talk about Group G, which has, I think, the bookies' favourites, but also the favourites of a lot of people we've spoken to already, Brazil, alongside Serbia, Switzerland, and Cameroon. I mean, Brazil, Serbia, and Switzerland were together in the same group in 2018, so it's going to be familiar for them. Brazil won that group. Do you think they'll win it this time?
Yes, well, they are the most successful team in World Cup history and the tournament favourites. Neymar is in strong form and will be looking to win his first World Cup. Do you think he's one of the best attacking midfielders in the world at the moment?
Oh, easily. It's no question whatsoever. Neymar's been at the top of the game ever since pretty much his debuts, even in the Brazilian league in Santos. And, of course, when you think about world stars in football, especially at the international level, Neymar will come to mind. Comes into tournament in sensational form for PSG and also for Brazil, having been the top scorer of the most recent qualifying stage for the World Cup, in which Brazil completely dominated, not even losing a single game and just, well, completely being amazing.
Well, yeah, I mean, but Brazil are everyone's favourites for this group, certainly. But what would it take to unseat them? What are their weaknesses? What could be the biggest obstacle? I mean, Neymar, obviously, when he got injured at the 2018 World Cup, they fell apart a bit. What could trip Brazil up?
So within the groups, we definitely think that their weaknesses are probably in defence, specifically their fullbacks, probably the weakest area of the team. If we had to name one, maybe they're getting on a little bit. And some of the other teams in the groups, like Serbia, they play a very physical brand of football, and Brazil's defenders may struggle with that.
Yes, I mean, physicality has never really been a Brazilian strong point, and especially when you look like Serbia's Dusan Vlahovic and Alexander Mitrovic combo, a Swiss side that generally depends on stability and just generally energy. It's going to be a tough matchup, especially as, of course, Elise mentioned, the defensive side of Brazil is a bit of a question mark. Of course, their captain Thiago Silva is 38 years old, might not have that much left in the tank within him. The wingbacks themselves, probably easily the weakest in terms of strength in the entire side, both on the left and the right back side, considering they have a 38-year-old Dani Alves in the side. So physicality is definitely their weak point, but you'd also have to say mentally, will they be strong enough to handle the entire load of the tournament? Of course, 2014, the Neymar injury definitely led to the team breaking apart a bit, and eventually that historical loss at home to Germany, 7-1. We will never forget that moment. And similarly, they generally struggle a bit with similar issues in 2018 as well, where, again, as one of the favorites, they really failed to live up to its expectations and generally underperformed for what they're capable of, particularly Neymar himself, who spent more of the time rolling on the floor than actually doing anything useful. But this time, he's coming into sensational form, one of the top goal scorers and assisters in the world, and has the chance of even making history for the famous Brazil by becoming the top goal scorer internationally, ahead of the great Pelé, with just 3 goals in this tournament.
And we do think that actually it is important in tournaments, isn't it, to have that balance of experience and youth. I mean, Brazil definitely have that, obviously, with Thiago Silva, don't they? So we think that probably their downfall outside of the groups might be Argentina. Brazil lost in the 2021 Copa America final. So what do you think that Argentina could bring them?
I mean, it just seems to be the Brazilian kryptonite nowadays. I mean, besides the Copa America loss, which, of course, was Lionel Messi's first ever international trophy for Argentina. That isn't, I think the Olympics, but I'm not sure about that. They also were Argentina was the only team that Brazil struggled to play against during the qualifying phase, and the only team that they failed to beat, having drawn their only game. And admittedly, the second game never actually happened because reasons that I will think about later. But I mean, at the very least, Brazil won't have to worry about potentially facing Argentina until the semifinals, based on what would be the expected outcome of groups, in which both of them would be first. And I feel like Brazil might have a few more difficulties in terms of the teams they face here, but generally should have no real issue in finishing top of the group and remaining among the last remaining teams in the tournament.
Yeah, 100%. Switzerland have been one of the biggest underdog success stories at multiple recent tournaments. Can they do it again? And past that, is this the best Swiss team ever? They have some really special players.
Well, admittedly, Switzerland's history in terms of footballing nation hasn't exactly been the most stellar. We've generally been more of like a smaller nation that's really only in recent memory has started becoming a fixture in these major tournaments. The team had never made it past the groups, the last 16 before at all, actually, in any single tournament, except for probably that first one. But at that point, there was not that many tournaments. And that was like the 1950 tournament, probably. But of course, recent memory, of course, no one can forget their victory over France in the last 16 of the Euros just last year, which was dramatic and, of course, quite excellent to watch. A game that most people have actually probably forgotten at this point, but their actual victory over Spain in the group stage of 2010, the only team to have actually beaten Spain in the entirety of that tournament, which was quite an impressive feat as well. Granted, they got group stages, but let's not talk about that. And, of course, the most recent and memorable one, the fact that they overcame Italy in the qualifying groups in order to get automatic promotion to the qualification to the World Cup. And of course, we all know what happened to Italy. I'm sure all of our viewership from England will be very happy about that. And if we have any viewership from Italy, too bad.
Lots of Italian Southwest
fans. You can write me a message later.
Well, alongside Switzerland, we have Serbia. You've already mentioned Alexander Mitrovic and Dusan Vlahovic. They also have an incredibly talented midfielder in Sergej Milinkovic-Savic. Past that, do they have what it takes to make it out this group stage?
The quality really cannot be denied. That attack of Dusan Vlahovic and Alexander Mitrovic is possibly one of the best ones in the entirety of the tournament, particularly in terms of physicality and just general finishing ability, and they'll be very terrifying to play against. The big concern, of course, is their fitness condition. Of course, both of them have had their issues prior to the tournament. Mitrovic with a bit of an ankle issue, whilst Vlahovic has a bit of a groin issue. But as far as we are aware, the two of them are still set to play in the tournament, and well,
Yeah, so we know that Dragan Stojkovic said something about Mitrovic's injury and fitness recently. He said Mitrovic will go to the World Cup without a leg. We can even shorten his head. Mitrovic can go to Qatar with 1 foot. Why not? To be a unique player who plays with 1 leg like no one else in the world. So he's been in brilliant form, hasn't he? In his latest season when he's been able to play in the Premier League, scoring 9 goals in 12 games. So he'll be one to watch, even if it's just 1 leg.
Yes, Mitrovic has been sensational this year, even with his injury issues. Probably maybe one of his best seasons of his career, and that's considering he had a sensational season last year in the championship. Those injury questions remain, as well as general question marks about the quality of their defense and their goalkeeping. So this is a team that's going to be primarily relying on their attack. Of course, Milinkovic-Savic, as you mentioned, George is sensational and will be a big quality. But of course, let's not forget their captain, Dusan Tadic, who, despite his age of 34, is the captain, and he is still a sensational creative force and will surely be one to look out for, alongside Kostic, who will have chemistry with Vlahovic for their time at Juventus.
The other team in this group are Cameroon, who, last time I checked, were the only team with the bookies less likely to win the tournament than Qatar. But they have real history in World Cup upsets. I mean, anyone that knows the name Roger Miller will know about that. What can we expect from this Cameroon side?
Yeah, Cameroon is a very unpredictable side to predict, mostly because a lot of us will not have been able to watch them as closely, for African games have generally not been as closely followed. Of course, they've generally been on a bit more slide in recent times, especially having missed the last World Cup, and have not exactly been the most convincing form. I believe one of their friendly games they lost to Uzbekistan, and they most recently drew with Panama in their last preparation game before the tournament. But this is a team that has the odd capacity to mix it up. Of course, you mentioned Roger Miller. Of course, 1990, their only positive memory we'll say about the World Cup, in which they pulled off some sensational performances, including beating then reigning champions Argentina in the group stages in their very first game, and going all the way to the quarterfinals. They have some clear talent on the team, of course, with the likes of Frank Anguissa, who has been excellent and really stealing the show for a surging Napoli side in the Serie A and in the Champions League. We have also the likes of Nicolas Nkula, an experienced veteran center back who has his name around in some of the bigger teams in Europe as well. Andre Onana in goal, former Ajax superstar goalkeeper who is now applying his trade at Inter. And of course, we have to talk about some of their key attackers and the likes of Captain Vincent Aboubakar, winner of the Golden Boot in the most recent Africa Cup of Nations. Brian Ubemo from Brentford, who recently, of course, changed allegiance from France to Cameroon and looks to be a key part of this team. And of course, who can forget the sensational Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, legend of Stoke City.
Absolutely. So how do you think this group's going to end up? Give me some concrete predictions.
You're saying Brazil at the top?
Mm-hmm. Brazil at the top is the obvious choice. I don't think there's big shocks there. The real question mark, of course, is who's going to finish second. I mean, everyone's thinking it's either between Switzerland and Serbia, which there's some serious history there, especially from last World Cup, in which a last-second winner from Xherdan Shaqiri effectively sealed the Swiss's progress into the next round, and Serbia's exits from the group stages, which they've still yet to get through since they've become Serbia themselves. And of course, there was a lot of controversy around that event for a certain celebration that we will not mention. And based on the quality of the two teams, it's going to come down to a similar situation, it seems like. Of course, both have their question marks, of course, with Serbia's attacking fitness. And at the same time, we have the issues for Switzerland's star goalkeeper, Jan Sommer, who has had his own injury concerns heading into the tournament. He has played in the most recent friendly fixture against Ghana, but Switzerland has lost that fixture to Ghana, which will get some nice talking points for our following group. But it's going to come down to a very close call, and I think Switzerland's experience will just about edge them through. But of course, that can easily change depending on Vlahovic and Mitrovic. Meanwhile, Cameroon have the ability to really spice things up, but I think the general expectation is that they'll finished bottom of the group, and the hope at the very least not to pull off a 2014 where they spent more time fighting against each other than actually playing football.
Absolutely. And so just before you go, guys, who is going to win, as I've asked everyone, this World Cup and why?
You know, it's actually quite an odd thing, George. You know why? I was looking through the list, and usually I would have said my favorite would be Italy, but for some reason I can't seem to find them on the list of teams. I don't know why. So in that case, I'm going to go with Argentina, as other people have said. I think this team has probably the most balanced quality side that they've had in recent memory, even more than the time that they went to the World Cup final, with, of course, now having a very strong defense in Romero, Otamendi, and Lisandro Martinez. And, of course, you cannot deny the quality that they have up front with, of course, the potential greatest of all time, Angel Di Maria, Lionel Messi, and, of course, Lautaro Martinez, with even solid midfield as well. I mean, I think they have everything it takes to win the World Cup, and I think they can finally pull it off.
And for me, Ghana are going to win the World Cup, George. The manager, Otto, he's going to do it part-timers everywhere, I think.
I see absolutely no issue with that, Elise. Thank you very much, guys. That's been really interesting.
Thank you for having us.
We're now going to go back to chatting with James and Aisling about Group F after their minor technical detail. Hi, guys. Good to have you back. We got through Belgium, Croatia, Morocco, but still got questions about Canada. How will they perform? Can they replicate their brilliant performances from qualification?
I don't think so, to be honest, because I mean the group is tricky enough with the others. I mean, Belgium are sure to be table toppers. Croatia obviously have a lot of history there and doing well in tournaments, and Morocco I think are going to be really interesting to watch as well. So Canada, I mean, they haven't been at World Cup since 1986, so there's not much of experience there. But it is an interesting story. Their manager is actually English, John Herdman, and he this is actually his first job in men's football. But he brought them from 72nd in the world rankings to 33rd. So it's quite interesting how Canada have kind of risen in recent years. They did have a really good qualifying group win. They finished top of the group, but also it wasn't flawless for them. They lost to Panama and Costa Rica, and they recently lost to Uruguay and Honduras as well. So I'm not sure if they can really dominate this group. They do have a really interesting forward with Club Brugge, Kyle Larin. He has 25 goals and 54 appearances for Canada. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs. He'd be the standout for Canada. But as thinking about group standings, I just don't see them finishing anywhere above fourth.
Well, so if you've got Canada at the bottom of that group, what are your predictions for the top three? Aisling, I know you're very high on Morocco.
Yeah, I would say Belgium top. I think that's most likely to happen. I'm going to say Morocco second. Croatia for me are just a little bit aging now, and I just think their glory days are past them. So I'm going to say Morocco second, Croatia third, and Canada fourth.
And James?
I completely disagree. I think Croatia have a very good mix of young, talented defenders in Gvardiol and Sosa, and mixed in with Modric is just big game talent. I think Croatia will top the group. I think Belgium will still qualify, but I think they'll come second, and then I think Morocco third and Canada bottom.
Very interesting. We like a bit of disagreement, a bit of debate. So, final question. Who is going to win the World Cup, and why are they going to win this World Cup?
For me, it's Brazil. I think they just have such a youthful, talented, versatile side. I just think it's going to be them that come out on top.
I'm so hot on Uruguay, George. I think they're going to be incredible. I think they've got a very talented set of players. I think Valverde is one of the best players to watch in football. I think Suarez, we know, will do absolutely anything to win that game. Any game, that is. And I think Nunez will come into good form. So I'm very hot on Uruguay to win the tournament.
Some good predictions there, guys. Thank you very much for coming back both times. And we're now going to move on to Group H, I believe. Group H is Portugal, Uruguay, South Korea, and Ghana. Some really big names in this group. And here are two big names to discuss it with me. Ben Palmer and Rachel Higgins. And this is a group with, if you look at Uruguay and Luis Suarez, South Korea and Son Heung-min, and Portugal, Cristiano Ronaldo, the three of the big names in Premier League football in the past 15 years. And then Ghana, they are such a storied World Cup side, especially if you think back to that big game in 2010. What is going to happen in this group? It seems really tough to predict.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that Uruguay are actually the real dark horse of this World Cup. And I mean that by I think they have the potential to win the whole thing, especially when you look at their path to the final. And as you said, Ghana, there's lots of question marks around them. What kind of side turns up? It will be very interesting to see. But notably, there will be a rematch of the 2010 World Cup quarterfinal between Ghana and Uruguay.
And we also obviously have Portugal, a team full of talent. South Korea as well, a team that do well in their respective region, but as the FIFA World Rankings tell us, they're currently outranked by their Asian counterparts, Iran and Japan. Moving back to Portugal quickly, just some notable talking points that we're going to move on to. Obviously, their long-standing manager and a player that has been central to sporting news at the moment, Cristiano Ronaldo.
Well, talk to me a bit about Ronaldo. He really has just dominated headlines for the past week by being, well, Cristiano Ronaldo, really. Do you think he'll play a big part for Portugal? Do you think he'll even start?
So Fernando Santos recently, as in within the last day, has been getting grilled on this subject. It is pretty much the only question that journalists want to ask him is, how is Cristiano Ronaldo's interview affecting the Portugal squad, and will he be playing? Fernando Santos has understandably become a bit frustrated with this line of questioning. He maintains that it is not affecting the squad, it's not affecting team cohesion, and Ronaldo will feature at this World Cup for Portugal.
Well, Portugal have historically been an odd footballing side with some real talent, but have never quite been able to play brilliantly. I mean, even when they won the Euros in 2016, they weren't amazing. How important is team cohesion to a side like Portugal?
Yeah, so obviously going back to the topical conversation about Ronaldo, we saw that as he was entering that he had a bit of a frosty reception from his teammate Bruno Fernandes, but then also there was a bit of confusion as well. Diogo Dalot, I think that there is still some friendship there maybe, and those are his teammates from obviously his team Manchester United. So it'll be interesting to see, is this going to be a sort of a split understanding of what is actually going on team cohesion wise?
Yeah, and I'd add to that we saw in 2016 when Portugal won the Euros that team cohesion was arguably more important than any of the players that they had individually. We saw in the final Ronaldo go off injured against a imperious France squad. It looked like the tournament was France's to lose, and that they did, because Ronaldo became a second manager on the sidelines. It was one of his great stories of his career, willing on that fairly untalented Portuguese side against a team on paper in France that looked so much better than them. But Portugal worked together as a squad, and that team cohesion was utterly key. So I think that, especially going into a tournament like a World Cup, we've seen with France in the past in 2010 that if you aren't clicking as a squad, if there's issues within the team, that could be massively detrimental to a side and your performance.
It really can. You've already said you're quite high on Uruguay. They had a recent change of manager, bringing in former Inter Miami coach Diego Alonso. How has this, improved them, and why do you really think they can go all the way?
Yeah, so this will be the first international tournament that Uruguay enter without Oscar Tabarez as their manager since 2002. They started the qualification process really poorly. Uruguay, for quite a long time, it looked like they weren't going to make this World Cup. And so the big decision to let go of Tabarez and replace him with a fairly unknown manager and one who hadn't had a lot of success, even at club level and in the MLS, was a quizzical decision at the time. In hindsight, we can see it was a fantastic decision by the Uruguayan Federation. He has revitalized the team. He's brought fresh new ideas, and he has come into the job just as Darwin Núñez and Fede Valverde have become world-class players. So I think that change in manager could be what Uruguay need to really push on and replicate some past successes of 100 years ago.
Another other side in this group is South Korea. South Korea's number one player, greatest player of all time, is Song Heung-min. But there's been a lot of controversy around an injury he's been carrying. Do you have an update on this injury? How will it affect the South Korean team as a whole? And past that, do you think they can get out of this tough group?
Yeah, so obviously there's a big question mark over this player because he fractured his orbital bone in the first half of Tottenham's Champions League match against Marseille on the 1st of November. But it's good news. He's recently been seen training with a mask on. And there's been quotes from the manager saying that whilst he's still recovering, there shouldn't be any problems. And it's confirmed via social media that he's going to be ready. It's just not sure how many games he will play. He will play, but we're not sure how many games. And obviously, this is really important for a team like South Korea because he's a player that just outranks the level across the team. And he's really seen as a leader on the pitch. He brings up the level of play, I would say. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, no, absolutely. He is a world-class player in a squad that lacks talent in a lot of areas. And South Korea's performances do rely a lot on Heung-min Son, possibly more than any other side in this tournament. He is the decisive factor for whether they can be successful or not.
The final team in this group is Ghana. I mean, they've lost some of their stars of old, Asamoah Gyan being an obvious one, but they have started to pick up some new talent. I know they tried to get Callum Hudson-Odoi to go back to the sort of a team he's eligible for, and they did get Iñaki Williams. What can we expect from Ghana and Otto Addo?
Yes, the only part-time manager at this World Cup. He's currently the interim manager. He was brought in after an appalling African Cup of Nations for Ghana. They really struggled to squeak through the African qualifying process, but did beat Nigeria. So it's really hard to gauge what we're going to get with Ghana, especially because Otto Addo often likes to prepare his teams depending on the opponent. They don't necessarily have a set play style that they go with. As you mentioned, with other players changing eligibility, there's also Tariq Lamptey in there, the Brighton right back, and Dennis Odoi, the former Fulham defender. So there's not. It's a very difficult group they're in. They've got a really strong midfield. The lack of leadership, the questions around the leadership, the doubts around the leadership, they're all very telling of how Ghana are coming into this World Cup. It's kind of arrived at the wrong time for them. Although notably, Chris Hughton, the former Newcastle and Brighton manager, has been brought in as a technical advisor. So his experience in the Premier League may be really key to Ghana having any successes.
Very interesting. So I mean, that's Group H, our final group. How do you think it's going to end up?
So I think it's going to be Uruguay going top. I think Portugal will come in second, followed by South Korea, sliding in there in third, and unfortunately Ghana rounding things off.
Do you agree with that, Rachel?
Yeah, I think that was more of like a joint decision there. We did that in our predictions. We did rank it like that. So I think Ben said it perfectly.
Good. Glad you agree. So for the final time of the 8 times I've asked this episode, who is going to win this World Cup and why?
Okay, so my answer is I'm backing Spain. They have the best manager in the whole tournament, Luis Enrique. Love, love, love. I am just backing the Spaniards.
Good to hear something a bit different. Ben?
Yeah, it's powerfully persuasive. The argument that Rachel makes, I think that a big reason why Italy won the Euros was because they had the best manager at that tournament in Roberto Mancini. Spain definitely could. The real answer is Uruguay. I've spent £11 on betting on Uruguay, so it's got to happen.
Thank you very much, guys. That has been absolutely great. As I've said, as I've asked everyone, all 16 people we've spoken to have made a prediction to win the World Cup. 2 people picked Uruguay, which is interesting to say the least. Brazil got 3 votes. Argentina got 3 votes. There was one for Belgium, one for Spain there from Rachel. Elise's slightly left field pick of Ghana, let's say. France, the reigning champions only got 1, but reigning champions of a World Cup recently haven't done well, as we all know. But the most common prediction, and my prediction too, to win this World Cup has been Argentina. I hope you've really enjoyed this live stream. I've been George Sims, and you can catch all of our World Cup preview podcasts and articles on all of the Londoner sites, so Southwest Londoner, Northwest Londoner, Northeast Londoner, and Southeast Londoner. Thank you very much, guys. That's been great.